Welcome to Lesson 6, Converting Decimals and Fractions. So we have 4 objectives in this lesson. We're going to convert fractions to decimals, convert decimals to fractions, convert decimals to fractions with a specific denominator, and convert feet to inches and inches to feet. So let's talk about how we're going to convert fractions to decimals. In order to do that, we're going to look at fractions a little bit differently than we did before. Before, when we talked about 3/4, we looked at one whole part and split it into 4 equal parts, and then we identified 3 of those parts as being 3/4. This time, we're going to take 3 to be the whole. So we have 3 wholes, 3 parts. And we're going to split each one of those into 4 equal groups. So what you see there is that each one of these groups in a different color is equal. So those yellow pieces, I've got 3 of them there, 3 here, 3 here, and 3 here. Each one of those shaded regions, the different colors, is equal. So what I've done is I've separated the 3 wholes into 1, 2, 3, 4 equal parts. In other words, taken the 3 wholes and divided them by 4. So that's another way of thinking about what 3/4 would be equal to. I'm left with 3/4 when I take 3 wholes and divide it by 4. So 3/4 is the same as 3 divided by 4. This is how we're going to change fractions to decimals. So to find the decimal equivalent to 3/4, we're going to perform the operation 3 divided by 4. So to do 3 divided by 4, we'll do it with long division. Of course, 4 doesn't go evenly into 3, but from what we learned in the previous lesson, we can add a decimal here and add as many zeros as we need until we don't get a remainder. So 4 goes into 30 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. Take 28 from 30 and you get 2. Bring down another 0. And 4 goes into 20 5 times, with no remainder. So 3/4, or 3 divided by 4, is equal to 0.75 or 75 hundredths. Good, let's do another example just to show that again. Let's find the decimal equivalent of 5/8. So we'll take 5 and divide it by 8. Of course, 8 does not go into 5, but it will go into 50 6 times. 6 times 8 is 48. Subtracting, we'll get 2. Bring down a 0. 8 goes into 20 twice, giving us 16. 20 minus 16 is 4. Bring down a 0. 8 goes into 40 5 times, with a 0 remainder. So 5/8 would be the same as 0.625 or 625 thousandths. Good. Now let me show you how to go the other way. Now we'll start from a decimal and move our way to a fraction. Remember, we talked about how to name a decimal. So that formal name for a decimal is going to be really important when we change back and forth. We're going to write the fraction equivalent of the name, and then we're going to reduce the fraction, like we learned in the fractions lesson. So if I want to convert 125 thousandths to an exact fraction, I'm going to first just name it. Just make sure I think about consciously what the name of that number is. Not 0.125, but 125 thousandths. That tells me what to write. So 125 thousandths, just saying that way, makes me write it like this. And then I'm going to reduce that fraction. So I can divide the numerator and denominator by 25. 25 goes into both. 25 goes into 125 5 times. And it goes into 1,000 40 times. And to reduce that again, 5 still goes into both of these. So if I divide the numerator and denominator by 5, 5 divided by 5 is 1, and 40 divided by 5 is 8. So 125 thousandths is the same as 1/8. If I wanted to check that answer, I could go back and do what I did previously and change 1/8 and make sure I get 0.125 as a decimal. So let's just do that one really quickly. I'm going to take 1 and divide it by 8. 8 doesn't go into 1, but it will go into 10 once, with 2 left over. 8 will go into 20 twice, gives me 16. So 20 minus 16 is 4. I'll bring down another 0, and 8 goes into 40 5 times. So I get 0 left over. So I'm pretty sure I did it right, because I went from 125 thousandths to 1/8, and then back from 1/8 to 125 thousandths. Another example, 36 hundredths. So 0.36 is 36 hundredths. And I'm just going to write the fraction like I say the decimal, 36 hundredths. 4 goes into both of these. 4 will go into 36 9 times, and it'll go into 100 25 times. Remember that your calculator will reduce that for you, like I showed you in the previous lesson in lesson 3. So 9 over 25 is the same as 36 hundredths. Now let me show you how to straight change these right on the calculator. You can go right from a fraction to a decimal to the fraction on the calculator. So let's do some fraction and decimal conversions on the calculator. The calculator will convert fractions to decimals and convert decimals to fractions for you. We're going to use the fraction key here to do these conversions. You'll see above that fraction key it says F and some arrows and then D. This is how we change back and forth between fractions and decimals. It's in green, so to do it we need the third key, the green key, so we can do that operation. So let's do some examples. Let's change the mixed number 12 and 5/8 to a decimal. So I'm going to enter 12 and 5/8 like I would enter any other fraction. 12, the fraction key, 5, the fraction key, and 8. So that's 12 and 5/8, and I want to change that to a decimal. So I'm going to press the third key and press that fraction key to do that fraction to decimal operation. And again, I don't have to press the equal sign. It already gives me the decimal equivalent, which is 12.625. Now just to go backwards, if we start with a decimal, 64.375, and I would do the same exact thing. The calculator knows whether you're starting with a fraction or with a decimal. So I'm going to press that third key again and press the fraction key, and it'll give me that decimal as a fraction, 64 3/8. Next, I'm going to show you how to change a decimal to a specific fraction. In other words, now we're going to change a decimal into a fraction that has a specific denominator. This calculation will not be an exact calculation because we're going to be rounding. So it's not going to be an exact calculation, but it'll be close. Say I had 0.452 inches, or 452 thousandths of an inch, and we want to round that to the nearest eighth. Well, what we're going to do when we run around to an eighth is we're actually going to multiply the decimal by 8. So 0.452 inches times 8 gives 3 616 thousandths. What you want to realize here is if I multiply that by 8, then another way to write this is with multiplication, and I could go backwards with division. In other words, 3.616 divided by 8 would be equal to 0.452. So what this is telling me is that 0.458 would be this many eighths. Okay, now I don't want to have that decimal part of the eighth, so I'm going to round this part to the nearest whole number. So I'm going to take 3.6 and round it up to 4. So that is the same as 4/8 of an inch, or 1/2. So I'm going to do this example, another example again, to show you that process again. But really, I don't have to write this second line. I can just write this and realize that this is how many eighths I'm going to have after I round it to a whole number. So that is going to give me 4/8. Let's round 32 hundredths of an inch to the nearest 16th of an inch. So instead of multiplying by 8, this time I'm going to multiply by 16 because we're trying to get to the closest 16th. So 0.32 times 16 is 5.12. I'm going to round that to the nearest whole number, which is 5. So that's going to give me that 32 hundredths of an inch is equal to 5/16 of an inch, approximately. It's not exactly, but that's what we're going to round it to. Good. Next, let's talk about how to change inches to feet. Now, this is a conversion that we talked about previously in lesson 5, but we're going to show you another way to do it. Remember, the conversion was that 12 inches equals 1 foot. So we're going to use these conversion factors as fractions. Since I know that 12 inches is equal to 1 foot, then each one of these fractions is really just equal to 1. Because the numerator is really equal to the denominator. It's like saying I have 8/8 because those two things are equal. Even though they have different units, they have an equal value. So it's like multiplying by 1. So when you multiply by 1, you don't change the number. You just kind of change how it looks. So all we're really going to be doing is changing the units. So let's convert 128 inches to feet and inches. So we have a choice. You can either use 1 foot over 12 inches, or you could use 12 inches over 1 foot. But we want the units to cancel. So I know if this one has inches, and I multiply it by the first choice, 1 foot over 12 inches, then the inches units will cancel just like what we do when we multiply fractions. So I know those are going to cancel out. Then I can multiply straight across. 128 times 1 is 128. And 1 times 12 is 12. And then do the division. That comes out to be 10 2/3 of a foot. 2/3 of a foot in inches gives me 8 inches. So I have 10 feet, 8 inches. Let's do the same thing with 20 1/4 of inches to feet. 20 1/4 inches. And we want to change that to feet. So this time I'm going to use the conversion of 1 foot over 12 inches because I want the inches to cancel. So 20 1/4 times 1 over 12. This time let's do it as fractions. So we'll multiply these fractions like we did previously. First, change the 20 1/4 to an improper fraction. 4 times 20 is 80, plus 1 is 81. So 81 over 4 times 1 over 12. 81 times 1 is 81. And 4 times 12 is 48. 48 goes into 81 one time with 33 48ths left over. So we've got 1 33 48ths of a foot. Good. A few examples of changing feet to inches instead of inches to feet. So if I start with 94 feet, and I want to change that to inches, this time I'm going to use 12 inches over 1 foot, because I want the feet units to cancel out. So if I have 94 feet times 12 inches over 1 foot, the foot units will cancel. And I'd have to do 94 times 12, which gives me 1,128 inches. Good. One more example of feet to inches. 5.35 feet to inches rounded to 2 decimal places. So again, I'm going to use the same conversion we just used. 12 inches over 1 foot. The feet units will cancel. So I have to do 12 times 4.35, which is 52.2 inches. Good. Now let's do that same calculation, except we're going to round it to the nearest 1/8 of an inch when we're done. So same calculation we did before, 4.35 feet times 12 inches over 1 foot, which gave us 52.2 inches. So I need to change this decimal part to the nearest 1/8 of an inch. So we're going to do what we learned to do previously, multiply that by 8, which gives you 1.6, and you can round that to 2. So that would be 52 and 2/8 of an inch. That's all the material for lesson 6. To review what we did, we converted fractions to decimals. We converted decimals to fractions. We converted decimals to fractions with a specific denominator, and converted feet to inches and inches to feet. That's the end of lesson 6. I'll see you at lesson 7.